Afternoon, I'm Ben Treadgold, agronomist with farms here in North Lincolnshire. You join me on this beautiful June afternoon where we're at the Grayingham RTC, Regional Technology Centre for Hutchinson's. This afternoon we're looking at the plots that we've drilled using different varieties along with different seed rates and different row widths with regards to drilling. Now, some of the findings from the autumn, as you can imagine, not the best of autumns to be establishing crops in. There have been a number of things that we found. One certain aspect, seed rates. As the seed rates have gone up at this particular trial, the establishment rates have fallen. Although that might sound counterintuitive, what it has meant that the actual number of plants we've got in the plots is higher at the higher seed rates with the lower establishment counts. So what we can take from that is that, particularly during a poor establishment season, the higher seed rates act as a risk reducer in terms of the crops that we're establishing. Now, factor this in alongside the different row widths that we've drilled crops at, and we've found some stark contrasts. The wider the row width, the more tillers we've had per plant, as you may expect, simply because as the plants have more space to be able to tiller out into, they have adapted and utilised that space. Now, I have in my hands 4 Sundance plants, 2 from 12.5 centimetre row widths at 450 seeds a square metre, and 2 from a 25 centimetre row width at 450 seeds a square metre. Now we can just see the stark contrast in both the plant biomass, the height of the plant, and also the amount of tillers that we've put on each plant. Now this is going to be significant when we take it through to yield, certainly in terms of the amount of biomass there and hopefully the yield that it contributes, but also we've got to think about the amount of ears that we're going to get at harvest. Although there are more plants in this established in this plot, the actual number of tillers and ears that are going to be there are going to be far fewer. So we would put our money on the wider row spacing but the same seed rate, producing a better yield. Now, although we've said all this, we are looking at a poor establishment year in terms of the autumn we've just been through. If we think back into the establishment period of 2018, conditions were fantastic. In some of the smaller plot work that we were doing at that time, we actually found no particular difference between seed rate and yield at the end of the year. We've got to remember that both the establishment periods were very good and also the growing period through the spring was fantastic. And so if plots had a lower seed rate, they could compensate for this through tillers. Unfortunately, this year has been the opposite. We haven't had the plants to start with, and then we've had a very difficult start and continuation into the spring and summer, where nutrient availability has been difficult to capture by plants, as well as actually get the nutrition into the crop to start with. So this is something we're going to have to try and develop as time goes on, and what I would encourage growers to do is to actually look at when they're establishing their crops, the conditions they're going into, and how we actually factor that in going forward, because there's some big differences out there at the moment, not only in winter crops, in spring crops as well. So there's a lot we can learn from this year in a difficult time.
Hi, I'm Alice Cannon, and leading on from Ben in the larger plots that we got at the top of the site at Grayingham, we're down in the smaller plots, and those of you who have seen the introduction video, you'll notice that we had some seed rate work. So to my right here we've got 100 seeds, and to my left and further left we have got 300 initially and 500 further on. Now, as Ben has said, this year has been absolutely crucial to work out and see the effects that seed rates have on our crop potentials and our yield potential therefore. And not only has seed rate work been quite apparent this year, but so has matching seed rates to the soil conditions that we've got. So if we look initially at these 3 plots here, you will see in the 100 seeds to my right, it's very thin, and I don't think actually anyone commercially would even think about putting 100 seeds down, but visually you can see that there are large areas and gaps. So when Ben spoke about having higher seed rates as being reducing the risk for establishment, this is exactly what he meant. So in those gaps you'll have noticed actually the weed populations are very, very high. To my left here, we've got the 300 seeds. Now in the bigger scale data that Ben was talking about, we actually found that the seed rate of 350 seeds for this site has proven to be about right. And going out and checking your establishment percentages, as was encouraged, is exactly the right thing to do, to know in your own mind's eye what your farm needs in terms of seed rates. Looking into this 300 seed plot then, again you can see actually the coverage is a lot higher and the weed control therefore is a lot greater, and it's probably important to point out that actually both of these plots are in the untreated part of the trial, so they've had no inputs. The weed control that you see is purely through the competition of the crop. Something else that we have noticed when it comes to seed rates and soil types is that when you're on lighter soils, because the soil generally speaking doesn't support such bigger growth, the narrower row widths are proving to be more successful. On the heavier bodied soils we can get the wider row widths to perform better because the soil has a bigger capacity to support greater biomass and therefore tillering. That said, if you don't marry up the seed rate to the row width correctly, you will find that the plant won't tiller enough, and actually then that allows for more weed to come through, in particular your blackgrass. When we have done other trials in farms when it comes to cultivation, you'll notice actually here that the establishment of these smaller plots here and the varieties around me is slightly better than that of the big plots at the top of the field. Now the only difference here is that these plots have had a slightly greater level of cultivation to establish them, and getting your level of cultivation is absolutely paramount to allowing correct seed to soil contact and therefore good establishment following it. So whilst direct drilling is brilliant and can save you money if done correctly, there is a process to go through, and making sure your soil conditions are correct is one of that vital steps that you need to pay attention to. In a farm that we have sort of reduced the cultivation on, who wish to go down the direct drilling route, rather than diving straight into direct drilling, we've actually this year encouraged an inch of movement first, and that was done by using actually a top down but taking everything out, so just moving it to that inch layer on the surface, and that compared to what they've done with the direct drill straight in has improved establishment by 112%. So that's a phenomenal amount of increase in plants there. More plants, more tillers, more yield. Make sure you marry up the cultivation level to the soil types that you've got, the seed rates to the row width that you've got, and the drill type.